James.
So today we wanted to go ahead and give you an update kind of our experiences. Like there's no feedback. Is that better? Okay. We wanted to give you updates of our experiences to date and from last week forward. James, I'm ready.
Sorry.
You're all right.
The audio's back here.
Yeah, good.
Day or second day, you receive an email communication from the school and also a phone call that notifies you what day and what the next steps are if you were going to go mask. Likewise, if you fall off of that warning system, you also receive a call. So you're receiving and an email. So you're receiving it in both directions. We also added a little mask indicator that shows if you kind of scroll over that, it'll tell you the day that that mask mandate is up as well. So that has been an addition to the dashboard. And also we added the modified and regular quarantines, kind of separated those out to be seen. Obviously, the modified quarantine, students can stay in school, which is part of our goal of 5 days a week. Is that better? There? Okay. So I wanted to give you an update on the K-5 Blended Academy, which is the top part of the table. And I went ahead and added just an update on our virtual academy that's taking place 6/12. So to date we have 38 students enrolled in our K-5 Blended Academy, and we are up and ready to go. Students have been given their Chromebooks and we are getting started. There are some families that are still calling buildings inquiring about that, so I would see that number fluctuating just a bit up in the coming days. We also have some families who are reaching out to re-enroll into the district if they unenrolled to have a virtual experience somewhere else. So they're in a re-enrollment period with the board office, and then they will be added to those numbers as well. So I'll update you when those things happen. In our 6/12 virtual academy, we have 101 students engaged, which is great, and they have been engaged since the start of school. If we move forward, another high priority focus due to our COVID experience so far has been, how can we support the learner who is home? So our principals led some work since the start of school to make sure that we have equitable access to lessons that teachers can post. That could be a recording of a lesson or anything that gives them access to what was taught in class that day. We have worked out systems to make sure that students can access their independent learning task, assign something that complements that lesson that they can engage in at home. And then
When we started on this journey collectively through our work as a board, parent advisory group, medical advisory group, we definitely had an emphasis on focusing on having 5 days of in-person instruction for all our students. So we continue to maintain that goal. So the goal, if we can advance forward, is really to kind of do a temperature check here and see how we're doing to that end. So at this point, I wanted to highlight for you, this is a collective glance at, this is day 11, 12 of the school year, sorry about that. So currently we've experienced 62 cases, 566 total quarantines, 418 of those have been out of school, and 144 of those have been modified quarantines. So students have been able to stay in school, although they were identified as a contact. Staff, we have 6 cases, 33 quarantines, 9 out of school quarantines, and 24 modified quarantines. Thus far, we have 2 buildings that have moved to mandated masking, so that's Edgewood and Funzold. And as of today, we have 0 buildings on watch at this. The one thing that is different than last year, and we'll hit that again in another slide, is that 19 students who were identified as a close contact have led to a positive case. So more than once, even when we returned last year to 5 days a week, we talked about we did not have any students who had turned positive. There was one in question, if you remember right, and they were on multiple contact lists, so you could say we had possibly one. This year we have 19. Could those 19 students have contact outside as well? Possibly, but certainly they were on our contact list and have resulted in a positive case. So little updates from the Union County perspective. We always try to visit that, and I know Mark talked with Jason today. So we still, thank goodness, are at 0 hospitalizations, but moderate to severe cases has escalated to 19. So the last hospitalization was recorded in July. They told us before mid-April. So something must have transpired in that time. And then you can kind of see the definition of what moderate and severe are there. So to kind of frame things up, as we talked about on that last slide, there have been 418 out of school quarantines. So students have been excluded from school due to the Ohio Department of Health guidelines. So the flow chart we have kind of simplified from a very complex flow chart that they issue to make it a little easier. 95 of those students really received their quarantine as a result of either being within 3 feet of someone or an outside case, right? So if you think of that, it would be our kindergarten classrooms, for example. If out of those 418 cases, if they had been masked at the time of close contact, it would have resulted in 320, of the 418 cases, 323 of them could have remained in school with a modified quarantine. So over 75%, 77% of the out-of-school quarantines would have actually been modified quarantines according to the guidance from Ohio Department of Health and allowed those students to stay in school. So we wanted to give you a little historical glance. We, at our worst point last school year, would have fallen in that November timeframe shortly after Halloween. We had 7 student cases and 188 quarantines, and we had 6 staff cases and 57 quarantines. At that point in the year, modified quarantines had not come about. Modified quarantines morphed roughly in the spring, but it was April-ish, March-ish probably. So you can see that we are in definitely a different place than even our worst point of last school year. And again, just reiterating, last school year we did not have any close contacts or possibly one. I will turn it over.
I just wanted to get you an update on some of the data from schools. First things first, we like back and mentioned that we made some volatile updates to our dashboard. As you see right now, something you notice is the little mask icons on Edgewood and Bustle to alert things to you that mask as monitored by cases. We actually cover over top of those masks and they tell you the mask you will see Tri-Academy no longer have an indicator. That means in the last 7 days there have been places. In fact, like I mentioned, all of our that were on launch, so the one that go on day-to-day counts, they only go and they've actually had a reduction in the last 7 days. It's 60% yesterday. That I suspect that will continue to go down. I also wanted to provide an update on what's been transpiring in the county. We always take a look at the Marysville and Raymond zip codes, and the last time we came together, I believe we were around 250,000 or 250 cases per 100,000 individuals in the Marysville zip code, and if memory serves me correctly, we had not registered a case out in the Raymond zip code at that time. That has since changed. Within Marysville, we're at 520.9 cases per 100,000, and in Raymond, we're at 548.7 cases per 100,000. And based upon historical CDC guidance for spread, we would find ourselves in a substantial spread pattern based upon the case rates for those 2 particular zip codes at this time. Something that we're always paying attention to is the water reclamation data, so the gene copies of COVID-19 that exist per liter of water that we're able to collect in the water reclamation region. And what's interesting is we've actually had a relative period of stability since, or at least the window of time where they've collected data in the last month, so August 1 through August 24th. And again, that's something we continue to monitor because there is roughly a 2-week lead time on a spike within the gene copies per liter that we find in the water reclamation data that usually translates to increased rates of cases within the municipalities that cover that water reclamation region. Also wanted to take a look at kind of our 3 worst points in time relative to our COVID-19 experience, and those windows of time would have been the week of November 15th of 2020, the week of January 10th of 2021, and then the 7-day period from August 20th up through August 26th of the current school year. Just to kind of compare, you know, again, kind of our most impactful period of time leading up to the most recent 7-day period was in November, where we had 245 quarantined individuals and 13 cases. Fast forward that to date, and a similar, again, an equivalent 7-day window of time, and again, our worst period so far this year, we're at 32 cases and 358 quarantines in that window of time. Something else we wanted to take a look at was what the attendance rate has looked like in our district, and actually the metric I've been most interested in is the non-COVID related absentee rate, because we wanted to know whether or not people were keeping their kids at home when they could potentially be sick, et cetera. And a great way for us to do that was actually to compare, again, roughly 10 days into this year relative to 10 days into the 1920 school year, so it would have been August 30th of 2019. And what's interesting is when you take out the COVID factor, there's actually a roughly same number of absences between those 2 points in time relative to everything else. But then when you factor into the COVID into the equation, we're almost double where we've historically been. And when we look at September 8th and September 8th and September 10th from the 2020-2021 school year, when we're in a hybrid model and we're wearing masks, you'll notice there's a significant suppression in student absences at that time. Thank you. This is one of my last slides here. I've got one more after this. Something I've also been monitoring in-house is the rate or the number of modified quarantines that are coming to fruition within the district, potentially as a result of masking mandates that we've implemented in buildings. And the numbers that you actually see there are a 7-day rolling total. So that's why if you look off to the left, they won't align necessarily with kind of the blue spikes, which the blue mountains, if you will, are the numbers of modified quarantines per day that are just on a nice area chart there. But what we can say is that we've actually had a very steady increase and actually increased exponentially just in the last few days in our modified quarantine. I want to say usage isn't the right word, but the number of individuals that were able to engage in a modified quarantine, return to school, or return to work. Okay, so I constructed this chart because we had a wonderful community question around what we'll call the 820 event at Bunseled Middle School, where one day, that date would have had 32 cases and quarantines total for that COVID impact, and then a day later that increased more, and then another day later it increased even more. And so there was a little bit of confusion around the contact tracing process and how potentially one case can very quickly take down a building and how they all share the same onset date. So in our example, we were notified of a particular case in the middle school on 8/23. And this person, or this individual, had all of their close contacts, or the last time they were around other individuals, was on August 20th. So that would have been the onset date. And then on 8/24, we were able to complete all the contact tracing, which is what I have highlighted there, so I have each day articulated. And that resulted in 31 individuals being identified as close contacts as a result of one person being a positive case in this situation. Some of them were masked. Those are little blue dots up there. Our gray ones are individuals that needed to be quarantined outside of school. And then of those 31 close contacts, one of them turned into a case, okay, which again turned into another 17 close contacts. Since again, they can all be traced back to the same origination date. That's where they all share 820. And of those 17 close contacts, another one of those individuals turned into a case, and that resulted in another 14 close contacts. So just in a span of 4 days, we were able to, we had 65 individuals have their lives impacted in just that short amount of time. Yeah, so I just wanted to have that kind of out there. Just to show again how they all share the same onset date of the 20th, just due to the close contact and contact tracing protocol, but then again how quickly kind of COVID works through a building and how it kind of reaches its tendrils all over the place. And that is all that I had.
So as a reminder, since we've talked a lot about the modified quarantine and quarantine, we wanted to come back to this flow chart and really talk about the ways in which our kids are being excluded from school right now according to this framework. So certainly if you're an individual with a vaccination and you're exposed, you go into a mask for 14 days and you can still attend school. So in essence, a modified quarantine of sorts. You're able to still attend school during that time. If you're an individual with a mask but no vaccination, then it does come down to distance. If you're within the 3 feet range, you will be quarantined. Now, there are testing options to get you back to school sooner. We didn't extend the flow chart out all that way. We just stopped at that point. If you're in the 3 to 6 foot distance, you can go in then to a modified quarantine and you can attend school at that time. If you're an individual with no mask and no vaccination, you're within the 6 feet, then it's a quarantine at home. And if you've already had COVID within the last 90 days, you'd be able to mask up and still attend school. And I know, I think Mrs. Savage mentioned at an early meeting, the quarantine guidelines really didn't change as we entered this school year. And I talked last week again about really paying attention to the category in which your child would fall in order to make the best decision in the choice model to make sure your kid can stay in school. So certainly there are some restrictions associated with that health department guidance.
Is that 15 minutes, so 6 feet, 3 feet, is that 15 minutes in the course of the day? Is that how it works?
Yes, and it's within the day, not just one encounter of 15 minutes, but it's a collective time over the day. I think you've asked before, Mr. Luke, about keeping track and who keeps track. I mean, that burden and responsibility falls then on the teacher and the principal to establish that. So we have talked to the task force and the medical advisory committees and really talked about, you know, the feeling was the dashboard was effective in telling us where we were, but certainly we were having a lot of tensions and continue to have tensions with meeting our goal of 5 days in-person instruction for all kids. We also talked about how quickly BMS escalated over that 10% threshold and really talked about were there different ways in which we could make decisions about that alternate platform that weren't linked to a percentage. For example, you know, operationally, we just sent out a message to Bunzel the other night. Operationally, we still had staff, we were in good shape, we could still offer, even though they had been in the red. So to kind of get away from that 10% threshold made sense really across both those groups. And we talked a lot about volunteers and reasonable guidance, especially since our numbers seem to be accelerating at this point in all the groups. And general consensus was, you know, let's create some barriers for our kids and not bring more kids maybe into or more people into the buildings, and think that through right now while our number seems to be accelerating. So we did want to make mention that we do have a vaccination clinic that will be hosted at Bunzel Middle School on the 18th. Mr. Chafin has been working with Dr. Orsina and his team to get that scheduled, so we'll be sending out more information to families through our email system. We have had some parents reach out with more interest in having their children be vaccinated, so we'll try to create those opportunities. So it comes to recommendations. I have a few things that I will ask you to consider tonight, given the information we've shared. First and foremost, if we're keeping in mind our collective goal of in-person instruction 5 days a week, the quarantine guidelines are increasing student absences for us exponentially. They are creating obstacles for our students to come every day, given our current format. And at this time, we do have evidence of potential school spread. So something we did not recognize last year and is a concern as well. So it would be my recommendation at this point through October 25th that we'd implement a mask requirement for all students PK through 12. Extracurriculars, I know will come up as a question pretty quickly. I would recommend, and the teams talked a lot about looking at other districts and what they're doing as far as extracurriculars. Last year, obviously, extracurriculars were part of our problem. This year, we've had a few cases on teams. Coaches have had kids spaced out. It's been rather unimpactful, quite honestly. So that is why we would maintain that we continue with the protocols they have already established. Same with show choir. Certainly things like student council that might meet during the day would be following those guidelines. We're going to encourage as much or as many activities as possible to take place outside for obvious reasons. We want to continue monitoring our experience with the dashboard and metrics. Kind of the feedback from all groups really was around it's effective. It tells us where we are. We definitely heard we appreciate the one-day update. That made it easier for people who were talking back and forth. And I think it's also cut down on, for lack of a better word, dashboard obsession. Some people were continuing to check, and that was never the intent of making it real time. So slowing that down. I would also recommend, similar to like a calamity day, that we move that alternate instructional model determination back to the superintendent. So as we look at absences and our ability to operate, then I would work with the principal to make those determinations on, if an instructional change would need to take place, hybrid, remote, anything similar to like we do for a calamity day. Also, because we still want volunteers involved, we had a really good work session with our advisory group. And so things outside, we'd encourage volunteers to be a part of. Specifically, examples were given for someone may cut out shapes and things like that for a teacher. So setting up times that they could pick those up and take them home and return them. But the idea was to really limit or no student contact so that we're not putting another loop in the contact tracing. And really those opportunities would be set up with the building administrator kind of under those guidelines. If something was, for example, some buildings have a door right into their copy room. So if the person was just going to come in and copy, but for example, if the building was masked, then that person would be asked to mask. So they would have to follow those same classroom or district procedures. I imagine that some of the things that we've talked about keeping our decisions local with this recommendation might cause some angst. Our high school numbers have not been significant. But right now, I think you've seen our community spread is higher than we've seen it. And certainly our students are going out and being exposed in those environments as well. And really with keeping the idea of trying to keep students in, at least if we can qualify them in that modified quarantine area, then we come closer to our goal of 5 days a week in school. And I think, that's really kind of been that ongoing theme. We were happy to get them back last spring. It would be much like the return last spring moving forward.
Okay. Question. If other than the mask mandate, what would be the next option?
Well, another option could be moving to hybrid, and I would say that because that's how we're going to get space. The district certainly, we've had increased enrollment. Our classes are pretty full. It's nearly impossible to get 6 feet of space, which is what you would need if you were unmasked. So hybrid model would be a way, I suppose, to get to that, but then you're foregoing the 5 days of in-person learning.
So after hearing that recommendation, would I have a motion from anybody to approve this recommendation?
Motion by Mr. Smith. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Luke. So now that gives us an opportunity to ask any more questions, share comments, thoughts.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the masks on the kids. And I know we had a long period of masking last year, so we have a lot of experience, but you know, it's a new year, and we are getting input from a lot of community members, some of whom are of the opinion that masks are harmful to kids. We got a note a couple days ago that was couched in all kinds of insults and ad hominems and was sort of unintentionally hilarious, but I was able to go to the study that he cited and click on it, and I read through the whole study, and it was a study that purported to show that masks were not healthy for kids. And when I dug into it, it was actually about adults wearing surgical masks, primarily, not kids wearing cloth, let's say. So I haven't seen a lot of I haven't seen any studies that I thought held up that showed that masks harm kids. But I'm also interested in how it's going in the buildings, how it went last year, how it's going now, what are those forms called where you can get an exemption. You know, if there is a kid that has a health issue with a mask, I think there should be a form or a process. So does anybody want to speak, Diane, or anybody that you think is relevant to how the kids are doing with the masks and whether we're making sure that it continues to be healthy for them, not unhealthy?
So first of all, the mask exemption form has gone out in several emails and can also be found on the website, and those all go through Mrs. Jude's office. And so she reviews those and approves those, or sometimes has to ask maybe some clarifying questions to those. Compliance at Edgewood and the middle school has been really great. We had extra staff to help kids who may have forgot come from the board office and help hand out masks, and we had extra. And some people didn't get the message at the elementary, so we just made them available, and quite honestly, compliance has been quite high. Same on.
Do you have any sense from any of the administrators or teachers that the masks are harming the kids' health?
Not had that or had anyone, to my knowledge, call in and make that case. If so, we do have a health exemption form that they could complete.
And the other thing that's come up, and not just from parents, but also from you and others, is does it impact the learning experience? So what are your thoughts about that side of it?
Right. So I would make the case, and I have the whole time, there is something to be said in especially early literacy from being able to watch, learn, and repeat a lot of the things we teach kids to do in those early lit opportunities. We still try to create those through see-through barriers. We have speech pathologists that wear the clear, I'm sorry, I'm losing the name of it, but mask option. So is it ideal? No, but neither is 500 students being sent home and being disconnected. So when we're talking about that social emotional piece, we did receive lots of feedback about students going home to isolation, feeling withdrawn. Ashley spoke about us being intentional about all the quarantine students and touching base with them on a regular basis. But there is something to be said with the disconnect that's happening to a student who goes to quarantine as well. So I think there's a fine balance there. I think there's opportunities, especially right now while the weather is great, to make some accommodations and get kids outside and do some of the same things we're talking about.
So when the initial plan was launched
we talked about measuring building by building. And it seems like it's been building specific with the outbreak. So can you explain the thought process behind changing to a mask mandate for everyone, regardless of their...
It's back to those quarantines aren't limited to one building. While Bunzold has probably been the hot spot of the school district, there are kids from every building that are being quarantined up to 14 days because of that flow chart, right? Because of those quarantine guidelines. So if our goal is 5 days a week for all kids, that would be the approach of masking all students, or the thought behind. Right, so October 25th is the date I suggested. That's after the first 9 weeks and after the October board meeting, I believe. It would give us some time for things maybe to calm down in that time frame. And we would look actually to make a call tonight to start it immediately from here forward.
No, go ahead, Brian.
I was thinking about this before we even came in, and I checked the health recommendations, still the same as 2 weeks ago when CDC, ODH, and the Board of Health here in Union County are all recommending that the kids should be masked, and the staff. If anything, the numbers have gotten more pressing in the last couple of weeks, and the fact that we have possible spread within the schools, which we never had last year, is also a concern. But I know some people find this to be a flashpoint right now. I don't think it has to be. I think it's just something that we do when the times call for it. This is not forever. If you followed this pandemic the last year and a half, we have these spikes and then they go down. Right now we're in a spike it's going to go down. So masking through October 25th and then reassessing makes sense to me.
So that we all have received emails that have questioned essentially the authority of the board to act. And oftentimes people will say, you know, parents should make decisions for their kids. And I don't know anybody on this board that disagrees with that, that parents ought to be advocating and making decisions for their kids. But as a history teacher, a government teacher, I know that the individual freedoms that we have and the rights that we have are not unlimited. There are boundaries, and many times those boundaries are set by law. I don't have the right just to drive on the highway as fast as I want to go. If I drive too fast, I'm likely to be stopped and given a ticket for that. And so we got one rather pointed email this week, and it asked the question, what was the authority? Where does it come from? And the Ohio Revised Code, 3313, has two sections that I think are appropriate. One section says that each city, exempted village, or local board of education shall have the management and control of all public schools of whatever name or character that operates in its respective district. The second section, further down, says Board of Education of each city, exempted village, local, or joint vocational school district in the governing authority of each chartered non-public school periodically shall review its policies and procedures to ensure the safety of students, employees, and other persons using school buildings from any known hazards in the building or on building grounds that, in the judgment of the board or governing authority, pose an imminent risk to the health or safety. The word shall, I tried to emphasize in that we have an obligation. Parents have their obligations for making decisions for their child. We make decisions for over 5,300 kids when they walk into our school buildings. And the factors that go into those decisions sometimes overlap and sometimes are entirely different. And so I know in reading all of the emails, I've paid attention. I read one study somebody suggested could have been the same one, where when you went to the limitations of the study, it said we rejected everything that didn't agree with our point. They only accepted things that supported their position. So, you know, I've read, I've studied, I've tried to look beyond just the surface of things. And as I see things, outside of our school district, our community spread in our zip code here is 520 people per 100,000. And in the Raymond area, it's 548 per 100,000. Now, low spread is about 50 per 100,000. So we're about 10 times above that. So even if we see in our school buildings today a lack of cases or maybe even quarantines, surrounding that building is an unhealthy environment, and our school district is not going to be able to avoid that. And I think that's a serious factor for us to consider as we move toward a decision. Our goal has always been to get the kids in school 5 days a week, kind of under whatever circumstance we need to do to be able to do that. That's the goal, that's the objective. And I don't want to be dissuaded from trying to achieve that goal. And we saw today that the modified system, the modified quarantine, would have, in the one example that we had, reduced the number that were out of school by 77%. We'd have gone from over, what was it, over 400, I didn't catch the number exactly, but it was over 400 kids. It would have dropped down to just over 100. And that means 300 and some kids, maybe 350 kids, would have been in class rather than at home. And I think that meets our goal. That meets our objective of getting kids in school. It's not easy. Any decision that we make is people are going to disagree with, at least some people will. They have on everything else we've decided to this point. So that's it.
As I looked over and listened to all of this information, the things that stick out in my mind, I've always been interested in what kind of experience are we seeing with the actual illness. So seeing that data with, more moderate to severe reactions, to me, that's a red flag. And then really just this whole idea of trying to minimize the spread, I look at it as a benefit to both our students, our staff, and our community, both directly and indirectly. Yeah, obviously, as we've said, I don't know how many times, we really want our kids to be in these classrooms 5 days a week. But then when you move on to the family side, every time that student is quarantined, these families are dealing with trying to adjust their schedules. And they may have to take time off work, or they may end up being exposed themselves. And then that impacts not only the family, but our community as well. So it's really, as we said last year, we are all in this together, and in my mind, that hasn't changed. And I know some of the emails that we've received, people have just been imploring our community to have that sense of togetherness and focus on doing what is going to help keep our kids in school, keep as many people healthy as possible. I know that, that percentage of severe illnesses, it is low for the most part. But if you know somebody, and I have a neighbor who had it and says since she's had it, she continues to struggle with breathing, well, she just struggles with that. And so, that's just one person, but there are many stories out there, and I do feel like our community has always been very collaborative and willing to work together and doing what's right for the good of everybody. And you can still have your opinions, and you can respectfully talk about those opinions. But I just kind of go back to that whole sticking to the trying to get as many kids in that to be in the classroom 5 days a week. And I feel like this gives us the best opportunity as well. And as far as the timing, we're still going to be having our regular September meeting on the 16th. She said we'll have that regular meeting in October, and if we need to schedule another special meeting, we're able to do that as well. I know that we all want to continue to stay on top of this. I also want to thank you and your team, because the amount of time and effort you've put into analyzing the data, providing data for our community, and improving it so that it's easier to understand. I'm just really grateful for that. And I'm also really grateful to our board for your willingness to really stay focused on our students and doing the right thing, knowing that we're never going to make everybody happy. It's a difficult position, and so I appreciate you all.
Last year was a very different circumstance than what we're in now, in so many different ways. And we talked about from time to time that it was a process that we were going through. A learning process as much as anything else, because we started out and we didn't have a lot of information, and the dashboard that was created by our administrative staff was very helpful in making clear the local circumstances, because I've always advocated that we need to look at what's happening in our district, what's impacting our children in this district. And the point that you made with the dashboard providing information, that information is local information, it's focused information that looks at as many different factors as we can possibly consider. And it has been extremely helpful to me in being able to come to a point to a decision on this issue. It is, a course correction. It's, based on the learning experience that we have. And one thing I appreciate about this board is that they haven't locked in on any one characteristic or one feature and said we're never going to deviate. We're always trying to learn and always trying to improve and always trying to get better. So thank all of you.
I would note also that the comments or the ORC codes that you referenced, there are copies of them up here available if anybody would like to review that too. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then roll call, please.
All right. Mr. Smith? Yes. Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, the motion carries. So there will be notification going out tonight about this change, and as of right now, it goes through October 25th, and we will continue to monitor closely. So with that, unless somebody else has any other comment they would like to make, then I would accept a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Savage. Second by Mr. Luke. Roll call.
Ms. Savage? Yes. Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Powers? Yes. Mr. Smith? Yes. Ms. Devine?
Yes. Motion carries, and we are adjourned at 5:28. Thank you.